Hey guys, it's Moat, and today we're going to be talking about something real sweet. One of my favorite decks, and it's Talk. It's one of my favorites I've ever played. One of the first sort of tournament style decks I ever played, instead of just like jamming random cards together in my precons and whatever I had in my collection. Dog was one of the first decks I played that was like, this is a good deck. It was actually pretty cheap. This was back in the day when there's a lot more powerful commons and uncommons and stuff, and your deck wasn't filled with super expensive rares and mythics or whatever. There weren't even any mythics back then. So this deck was super fun. I love it. It just definitely has a very unique play style. Definitely that's something a lot of people liked. And it's really great because, well, I mean, just look at this guy. He's got so many teeth. They called him Dr. Teeth. I don't really know why he was called Dr. Teeth, but that was one of the nicknames. Even, and this is a little, like, I remember talking to some of my friends a really long time ago when this card first came out, and it was like it would actually be worse if the card was actually better. For example, if it was like a 3 mana 4/5, um, because you couldn't one shot someone with it. Like it would be good, obviously. Like 3 mana 4/5 with no drawback would be. I mean, that's pretty good, right, for blue black. But it's actually worse in a lot of ways because it actually it can't yeah, well, like I said, it can't one shot someone with like a bajillion cards in your hand or graveyard or whatnot. So, but it's sweet though. Oh boy, this thing is sweet, and I love it a lot. Look at that thing. He's got that crazy look in his eyes. He's got drool. It's like the only Atog that was like both the abilities were synergistic with each other. The other ones were just, well, the other ones were bad. They were not good. So this deck is very unique. It's not like the other sort of Weissman control decks that were very dirtily the sort of blue-white control decks or the multicolor control decks that had like maybe a Millstone or like a Serra Angel or something to beat them down eventually. This deck can almost kind of play like a tempo game plan in some respects, um, but it's definitely not a typical control deck. Yeah, oh, that's good stuff. It's able to answer pretty much most cards through counter magic and duress, and then whatever other spells you want to play. So pretty much any permanent is able to be dealt with. Um, you can even there's stuff like recoil or whatever that'll work against any like land or artifact or enchantment that they have in play. Recoil is probably not the best thing to play, but it is a possibility, and it is a pretty decent card. So um, so that's again, it's just an option, just something to remember. The greatest thing about this deck, obviously, draws a lot of cards, and it does so much. It doesn't even matter half the time what cards you're drawing, because all you really need to do is feed the Psychotog. And if you draw enough cards, of course, you'll draw into more disruption and stuff to stall your opponent or kill their stuff for a while until you can tog them. And the deck can pretty much adapt and deal with anything. Um, just due to the nature of like this color combination being really good. Whereas Dress will take any sort of nasty artifacts, enchantments, or spells that are hard to deal with or uncounterable or whatnot, and well, deal with them preemptively, and then of course counterspell, mana leak, that kind of stuff cleans up everything else. So, what does this look like? Well, it looks like this. Um, Basically, you pretty much always want somewhere around 3 to 4 togs. And then there's other creatures you can play, but I got 3 Nightscape Familiar. I think maybe you could play 4, I'm not sure, but I think you definitely want at least 3 to 4 Nightscape Familiar too, because it's really good with all the cards you draw. It lets you play them out in a faster manner. Makes your mana leaks and memory lapses pretty nice, because it makes them just 1 mana. Um, and then of course you got some uh, single target removal, Smother, Diabolic Edict, that kind of stuff. And then your card draw. Again, nothing looks too weird here. Intuition AKs. Obviously, Fact Fiction's a big one. Um, Not playing Cunning Wish. Get to that a little bit later. And then, of course, the combo, which is basically just Upheaval and Psychotog. Of course, Nightscape Familiar helps accelerate this. And so it's really good because well, you can just Upheaval and then reset the board, then drop a Tog, and then just kill them next turn. so that's sweet. And obviously upheaval gives you a whole bunch of extra cards to discard and exile and that kind of thing. Lands, again, pretty obvious, nothing too weird here. I think the Salt Marsh are free rolls. You can probably play them if you don't really have, I mean, outside of the duress, you don't really have any 1 mana play, so it's not a big deal. And late game's not a big deal. Drawing a tap land, no biggie. So those are probably free rolls. And then 1 to 2 Darkwater Catacombs, you definitely want. Just playing one. I mean, there's no drawback on this card really, because you don't ever take 1 land hands. So there you go. There you go. And the sideboard again, typically kind of you really want those Hydroblasts against the red decks, and then lots of different cards against different things. But yeah, you pretty much always want the Hydroblasts. Those are probably non-negotiable. Honestly, everything else is kind of up in the air, I believe. So this deck, basically one of the biggest draws to it compared to like say any other control decks, any control decks, say like Landstill or whatever, is that you can deal with all sorts of crap with upheaval. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to worry about answering every single card they play, because you can just be like, well, if they're just dirtling around, you can upheaval, then tog, and then kill them. And there you go. So that's really nice. Upheaval is pretty sweet in that respect. And of course, it's pretty good against all the board control decks, which you might have a problem with occasionally. They can play a bunch of crap, like Enchantress will play a bunch of crap, and stuff like Solitary Confinement, and just this, that, and the other, whatever. Upheaval, you don't have to think too hard, it just deals with it. So if your normal plan of duressing and counterspelling stuff doesn't work or fails, or for whatever reason, you can just upheaval tog and then win that way. It's pretty good in control mirrors because play main deck duress is sweet, so that's really nice. I mean, duress is just so good against the format, and it's so good against random metagames. So you have to be a pretty weird metagame where you really wouldn't want duress main deck, I think. Plus, it's kind of like pre-boarding for stuff, because you save space in your sideboard. A lot of times you'll board them in, and so that's another reason why I like duress as well. Of course, duress is pretty sweet against combo decks. So turn 1 duress, turn 2 counter magic, turn 3 I don't know, keep up counter magic. I mean, it's sweet. It's sweet. So and of course you get a lot of good cards in the board against combo decks. Things like Tormod's Crypt, of course, pretty wonderful. And you can play stuff like Coffin Purge and things like that too. So that's pretty nice. And it basically functions as combo control deck, like I said, with the upheaval or whatever. But even against, even without upheaval, you can kill them, one shot them, if you kill all their guys and stuff or whatever. So that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. So one of the biggest problems with this deck is the red decks. Pretty much all the red decks are kind of a pain, because I mean, the red decks weren't as good as they were like in previous extended, or excuse me, they're better than they were in previous extended metas, because they got stuff like Lightning Bolt is legal, and that's huge, right? So the red decks are better, and they got more sideboard cards against you, and they got the red blast, so you need the Hydro Blast against the red blast, and it's just hard to control everything because a lot of the stuff's so much cheaper, so you're always sort of behind the 8 ball, especially something like, well, the problem with like, they usually got Sly or Red Deck Wins or whatever, they operate from just like kind of a linear combo almost, in a way where they're just tossing tons and tons of burn at you. And then you got goblins on the other end of the spectrum, where they're trying to grind you out or whatever. And then they have stupid stuff like Goblin Piledriver, which has Pro Blue because of Psychotog. It was created as like a one of those safety valves or whatever. So you can't even block the huge Piledrivers forever. You have to either counter them or remove them with Smother or something like that. So there's a lot of nasty problems. Fortunately, something like Hydroblast is very good, and then of course E-Plague is very good against goblins too. But they'll have all sorts of countermeasures against you too, and maybe boarding crypts. I mean, it just depends. So you gotta be careful against those decks. They're going to be pretty tough. Everything else though, you should have a very good game. You shouldn't be any worse than 50-50, if not better, against a lot of the field. Because, well, you can just answer everything, and then you don't screw around too much with stupid crap. You get to dodge stuff like Sabo's Web, which is a pretty big card, obviously against land still, which super hurts him bad. So not only can they not attack with their guys, it makes it much harder to get any amount of guys from cycling Decree of Justice and stuff like that. So that's a big problem for them, but not for us. So of course we have to watch out for stuff like Tormod's Crypt, which is a very common card in a lot of matchups. At least I almost always play like 4 crypts in my sideboard of a lot of my pre-modern decks, just because it's good against a lot of the combo decks. A lot of them, like the bargain decks, which will get bargain in play with, Academy Rector. Well, if you have a crypt in play, they can't rector out a bargain, which is big game. That's big game. And of course it dodges Cabal Therapy if you're going first and they don't have a therapy or whatever. So once you get it, you can play it and then keep doing your thing. So Crypt is really powerful. You gotta watch out for that. But you can board like a Null Rod against those decks, which is nice because that'll stop every Crypt. Like I said earlier, lots of good stuff to play against board control decks. I'm not sure if it's 1 to 2 upheaval main deck or 1 upheaval, 1 sideboard, or if you want Haunting Echoes. Haunting Echoes is, of course, very, very good because it pretty much wins immediately without pretty much any counterplay for the most part. So yeah, Echoes is really, really powerful. So I don't know which one, Upheaval or Echoes, which one you want more of, or a split, or like 2 and 0, or 1 and 1, or who knows? Who knows? It's hard to say, but Upheaval and Haunting Echoes are incredibly good, very powerful against a lot of board control decks, or even something like Lobotomy is okay, because you can launch it off and take a card from their hand, and then of course strip the rest from their deck. Hard to say, but a lot of options, and that's great. Deck's very skill intensive. There's a lot of different things you can do. Obviously, like knowing what cards to play and when, playing out your turns, and being aware of like, do you have lethal or not, being able to count the amount of cards, and obviously do math in your head with Psychotog. Like, okay, I have an AK in my hand, 3 in my graveyard, and I got 10 cards total in my graveyard and 2 in my hand, and then you have to obviously do the math and count, figure out like, can I, tog them next turn or whatever, that kind of thing. That's important too. Be able to plan ahead, and knowing when to just play out stuff. Do you want to does your hand say, oh, I have, a couple Nightscape Familiars, I'm going to use these to block against, this guy's Jackal Pup. Maybe if you've only got one, maybe you want to save it and counter more stuff and then drop it after they use all their burn or their incinerates or something. I mean, there's a lot of different decisions to make, and not only just that, but just in building the deck too. I'm not playing Cunning Wish, but you can. That's a good one. I like more sideboard space rather than being able to have a Cunning Wish board and answer anything like game 1. I like more room for just whatever different decks that I might play against. Who knows? I don't know which is the best strategy. Cunning Wish is obviously very good. I play 2 or 3 at least. Yeah, about 2 or 3 is usually what I play if I was gonna play Cunning Wish and Tog. You get stuff like Shadow Rift too, which is pretty nice. And you could play stuff like outside of Cunning Wish, you could play like Wonder main deck. You could play there's other removal spells like Ghastly Demise is okay. And obviously it's not as good against the black decks. Let's see, there's stuff like Force Spike and Circular Logic, which are good after an upheaval. So if they have like a 1 mana play, you can counter it. If you weren't able to strip their hand with Duress or whatever, you can Force Spike or Circular Logic their play after you upheaval, which is nice. And they're good cards regardless too. There's stuff like Foil. Foil is definitely a good one after, because you'll have a ton of cards in your hand, obviously, and you'll be able to have a bunch of stuff to pitch after an upheaval. So again, you can counter their 1 play, which is good. And obviously Foil's a perfectly fine card as is because you're drawing a ton of stuff, so it's not a huge problem. So a singleton Foil is probably okay. You could play stuff like Gush, but Gush is kind of wonky to play. It's okay to Gush when you're upheavaling because obviously everything's going back to your hands, you draw more cards and stuff like that, but I don't know about that. It's a little worthless otherwise because you really want to upheaval most decks. So there's that. You can play more single target removal. You might be able to play something like Arcane Denial. Maybe Arcane Denial is better than Memory Lapse, but I'm not 100% sure. It's a good card, obviously. Then there's stuff like Repulse and Exclude, which I think is just too expensive to be good. I mean, obviously they're good cards, and they're a little narrow there. Obviously, it's a little bit worse than the non-creature matchups. Those are sweet, sweet cards, very powerful. Obviously, they replace themselves, gives you tempo. That's pretty sweet. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of different stuff you could play. So it's hard to say what is best and what is not. Um, but I like the way I've built it as it is. So yeah, yeah. So lot of ways to sort of customize the deck, a lot of ways to make it good and any sort of meta. Like, oh, I got a bunch of green decks. Well, I guess I'll play Dystopia or Perish or something. That's pretty sweet. Even if or God, I have too many different options. Powder kegs, boy, you could play powder kegs. You could play no more null rods. Null rods out the butt. I mean, who knows? Who knows, right? Even Merchant Scroll. I forgot to mention that one. Might be a good one to play. Can search for any particular card. Gets Intuition, or gets your if you already used Intuition, you can get your last AK. Can get FOF. Get stuff. Sideboard cards. Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, so that's basically it, guys. That's Tog. It's super sweet. I hope you enjoyed it. Um, Definitely one of my favorite decks. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later.